I am continuing in my reading. What I'm doing in this series is to read through the entire standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This consists of the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. I am continuing reading in a chronological order, according to event, not according to publication or volume, so I'm skipping around a bit as I move along. We continue in the Gospels. We're down in Jerusalem, or the Judean area. This is the last portion of Christ's mortal ministry. He spent 2.5 years in Galilee, and he spends the last 6 months in Jerusalem and the Judean area. We've been reading primarily his discourses, his sermons, and his contentions with the Jews. Not a whole lot of miracles being discussed. There are a couple, but this is largely his teachings, and much of it is repeating what he had taught in Galilee, especially what we read in Luke. We are in Luke chapter 15, where we just read the parable of the lost sheep. We're going to continue reading in Luke for a little while, reading more parables. In this video, we have a Joseph Smith translation. Now, what the Joseph Smith translation is, this is a translation or correction done by Joseph Smith to restore those passages that have been lost or corrupted over the years. So now we read in Luke chapter 15, verses 11 through 32. And he said, "A certain man had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falleth to me. And he divided unto them his living. And not many days after, the younger son gathered all together, and took his journey into a far country, and there wasted his substance with riotous living. And when he had spent all, there arose a mighty famine in that land, and he began to be in want. And he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into the fields to feed swine. And he would fain have filled his belly with the husks that the swine did eat, and no man gave unto him. And when he came to himself, he said, How many hired servants of my father's have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and will say unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before thee, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. Make me as one of thy hired servants. And he arose and came to his father. But when he was yet a great way off, his father saw him, and had compassion, and ran, and fell on his neck, and kissed him. And the son said unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven, and in thy sight, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. But the father said to his servants, Bring forth the best robe, and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand, and shoes on his feet, and bring hither the fatted calf, and kill it, and let us eat and be merry. For this my son was dead, and is alive again. He was lost, and is found. And they began to be merry. Now his elder son was in the field, and as he came and drew nigh to the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants, and asked what these things meant. And he said unto him, Thy brother is come, and thy father hath killed the fatted calf, because he hath received him safe and sound. And he was angry, and would not go in. Therefore came his father out, and entreated him. And he answering said to his father, Lo, these many years do I serve thee, neither transgressed I at any time thy commandment. And yet thou never gavest me a kid, that I might make merry with my friends. But as soon as this thy son was come, which hath devoured thy living with harlots, thou hast killed for him the fatted calf. And he said unto him, Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. It was meet that we should make merry and be glad. For this thy brother was dead, and is alive again, and was lost, and is found. This is a very, very famous parable, the parable of the prodigal son. Now note that in this parable, the father does not go out searching for his son to bring him home. He waits. But when his son voluntarily returns, he welcomes him with open arms. God is always there waiting for us to come home. And he is willing to welcome all of us back into his house, back into the kingdom. No questions. Come to him, you will be welcomed. But he will not come and force you. Another thing to remember is that the younger son had already wasted his inheritance. The father welcomed him back in, but he did not give him of that which belonged to the elder son. He killed the fatted calf. He gave him clothes. He gave him those things that he had the right to give him. But he did not take away from the inheritance of the elder son. And that was the big issue for the elder son when he comes back and he sees the party going on. He's worried that what is rightfully his is going to be taken from him. But the father reassures him, no, everything that I have is thine. You are my right hand. But we can celebrate the return of your brother. Remember that nobody loses what is theirs because somebody else repents. What we have qualified for, we will gain, no matter what happens with anybody else. But we should all rejoice at the sinner that repents and comes home and returns to God and can share in that joy. But let us look in the Joseph Smith translation here now. In verse 12, give me the portions of goods that falleth to me, and he divided unto them his living, is corrected, goods which falleth to me, and divided unto him his living. So the oldest son did not receive his inheritance yet. He will, but he just gave the younger son what would be his. Verse 16 changed that to which, and in verse 20, instead of but when he was yet a great way off, it is and when he was great way off. In verse 22, it is the father said unto his servants, and instead of put it on his hand, it is put it on his finger. Makes more sense. In verse 29, where it says, and yet thou never gavest me a kid, we just remove the word yet, and thou never gavest me a kid. In verse 30, change which to who, and in verse 31, at the end, all that I have is thine, is just take out the word that. All I have is thine. Minor grammatical changes and clarifications, nothing real important there. So we leave that one here, and we will be continuing in Luke again in the next video, so I will see you there.